Can you hear us now, Jane? Yay! Woo! Right. Are you fantastic? Are you okay now? Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ben. Not done that much, am I? I'm just, yeah, just worried. You know, I mean, when you're on that, yeah. Just watch it. Good temperature. Yeah. Oh. Hi everyone. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes for people to join, and then we'll maybe kick off in like 2 minutes. I hope you can all hear us. Getting a thumbs up from outside. So a couple of minutes.
One more minute.
1 minute.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we'll get started. So thanks so much for joining us. So this is a new thing for the Marketing Society. So there's going to be a few lunchtime webinars with different agencies. So it's a bit of a test event. We were asked to go first at EssenceMediacom. So really pleased to be here with you today to take you through breakthrough for brands in the new communications economy. We've got a piece of research to share with you called Stronger Signal, Improved Impact. So just by way of introduction, my name's Toby and I'm the Head of Strategy here at EssenceMediacom Scotland.
And then Michael, so I'm responsible for all aspects of digital.
Okay, so multiple laptops, but we're going to, I think we've got all the technology sorted, so it should work seamlessly. So we'll get straight into it. Okay, so what this presentation is about is signal strength. And the way to sort of look at signal strength is it's media's X factor. So I don't know if some people might be too young to remember this, but Thierry Henry used to appear in Renault Clio ads, and there's quite a famous advert of him holding two chilies, and he's saying, this chili is stronger than this chili. Weird not. So it's like, it's got the X factor. So despite its size, it packs a bigger punch. So sort of this idea is called costly signaling, and Darwin hated it. So Charles Darwin said, and this is a quote, the sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, it makes me sick. And that's because he couldn't see its adaptive or evolutionary benefit. To Darwin's eyes, a big load of feathers out the back of a peacock made it easily to see prey, not very agile, easy to be caught, so not very good for survival. However, it makes perfect sense when viewed as a costly signal. Firstly, because the peacock must be quite fit to still survive with feather on its back, but also it does more than just look pretty. It does actually contribute to its strength as a species. So this X factor or signal is implicitly priced into media, but not yet clearly quantified. So we all intuitively know this when we buy a piece of media, that some media is sort of stronger than others. So, you might buy a cinema ad, and you might buy an ad in a urinal, and actually reaches the same amount of people, but sort of implicitly we know that one is stronger than the other. The question is why, and then the question is how can we measure this? And this kind of forms part of what we call the reach to impact gap. So media planners and buyers, we can work in cost per thousands and reach and frequency, and we can sort of put a plan together. We know how much it costs and we know how many people it's going to reach. But there's sort of that bit in the middle of it's all well and good reaching people, but what effect is it going to have? And this is kind of where signal strength comes in. So in the past, it's been sort of it's been weighted in terms of like viewability, targeting, where your competitors are spending, attention, which is a big one in sort of the new communications economy, contextual relevance and dwell time. But there's still something else. There's still something innate about the strength of the media. How do we know this? Well, a few years ago, ThinkBox, the TV trade body,
did an excellent piece of work called Signaling Success. So we know signal strength in media exists mainly thanks to this research from ThinkBox. There were some key findings. Signal strength impacts perceptions around brand fitness, quality, trust, and social standing. Signal strength varies by channel, and also how a channel is perceived differs depending on the audience, i.e. the demographic, young versus old, for example. As a media planner and media strategist, I've used this study by ThinkBox a lot. It's a classic sort of question, how does TV effectiveness compare to social media, for example? And this study has been super useful. So it's given us like a basis to work from. The right channel mix can hugely boost a brand's chances to build brand perception as a financially strong, trustworthy, and confident brand. And that's all without having to write a single line of copy. So even before the ad has been conceptualized by the viewer, the fact that it's on the telly, the fact it's on the massive billboard on the side of a building in the middle of New York says a lot about the brand. And the research did incredibly well, really well received. It won a ton of awards. But that was in 2020, and media consumption has moved very fast in the last 3 to 4 years. And also some channels were excluded from the original 2020 survey, for example, social. And these channels have also fragmented beyond recognition. There were some big admissions as well. So in the first survey, both out-of-home and cinema weren't included. So what EssenceMediacom did is we recommissioned the study with some tweaks. So we added in some new channels, working with Burst Your Bubble, who originally did the research. So we've added in out-of-home, cinema, podcasts, creator-led videos, aka influencer marketing, and retain the old favourites such as TV, radio, newspapers. Also included were paid social advertising and advertising on video sharing sites. So sort of the methodology here was to invent a brand, totally made up brand. It was called Tixi. We told the pool that this was either going to be a new grocery retailer or telecommunications company. And then we asked them a whole range of questions regarding Tixi and its launch. But the really important thing is, and it's similar to the 2020 survey, our technique stripped out all factors but media. So by describing the upcoming launch of Tixi brand to consumers, Burst Your Bubble were able to strip out the effect of creative, budget, quality, product quality, and the distribution of the marketing effect, and just hone in on the difference made by media. So this is kind of an example of how the proposition was posed to the consumer research pool. So this is the brand's Tixi. This is what they're going to do, and this is where they're going to advertise on which channels, and what does that make you think about Tixi, the brand. So having heard that the brand would launch via a campaign in one channel, respondents were asked for their opinion on the brand's likely characteristics across 2 buckets. So we had the brand fitness signals, so that's financial strength, confidence in the company, and the likely quality of the product or service, and the social brand signal. So is the brand likely to become successful? Will it become well known? And do they have confidence that a lot of people are buying it? So the results. So as an overview, as in 2020, we see that channels each have varying levels of signal strength, with TV advertising generating the strongest signaling strength across the board. So just in the most simplistic terms, just the fact that a brand can afford to advertise on TV implies to viewers that people must be both buying the brand, which is the sort of social signal, and that the brand must be financially successful, so which is the fitness signal, just by virtue of being on television. And you can see how the channels ranked here. There wasn't an awful lot of difference between fitness and social signal, but we'll come into the differences in more detail. But the big question is, versus 2020, were were the results replicated? Well, in short, yes. So the choice of media channel by the fictitious brand Tixi significantly affected the respondents' perception of the brand. And even more importantly, the signal strength for channels that featured in both studies was almost identical. So it would appear that time spent with media does not equate to improved signal strength. Online's video score was almost identical across the two studies. However, in 2020, when we detailed online video to respondents, the question read just e.g. YouTube. In the new study, we updated this to be e.g. YouTube and TikTok. So we incorporated a whole load of additional sort of video on-screen time there. But it didn't seem to make any effect sort of across the 3-4 years of this survey. So very similar results year on year. Or not year on year, but study on study. So a few other things to pull out. So cinema not appeared in the 2020 survey, and amongst all age groups, it scored really highly. So surprisingly, don't know if it's surprisingly, but for 16 to 24-year-olds, its fitness and social scores beat all other channels. Also, out of home and working with content creators, they weren't on the previous study either, and they both fared reasonably well. One of the weaknesses of the study is with measuring out of home. So there is obviously a massive breadth of possible formats and partners that might inform respondents' views held on these channels. So obviously we know out of home work very differently if you choose to advertise on Piccadilly lights versus running a load of posters in public toilets. And this also actually kind of goes for content creators, influencers as well. So, you know, depending on who you engage with, like engaging probably with Mr. Beast, for example, is going to get much different reaction to some much more obscure content creator. Another media to highlight is podcasts. They weren't actually covered in the first study either. They fared well amongst 16 to 24s, but actually, generally speaking, as a relatively new channel, we would say they're yet to develop sort of strong behavioural cues that the population interprets in a common way. So sort of middling to relatively low score for podcasts. And actually this gives credence to a bit of a hypothesis we also have, that shared consumption of media drives signal strength. So sitting down to watch TV together, listen to the radio in the car together, social occasion of going to the cinema, you kind of lose that with podcasts. One of the podcasts' strength, and one of the reasons we buy it, it lays in the intimacy of listening alone and being beamed straight to someone's headphones. So there's a balance to be struck here, but it did seem to slightly struggle as a new media to the server. Just delving into that social signalling versus fitness signalling. So 5 channels significantly outperformed for social signals versus fitness signals. So those were content creators again, so influencers, out of home, online video, podcasts, and radio. And we really saw these differences greatest at the younger age level, so 16 to 24s. What this would suggest is these channels are particularly good at positioning your brand in culture. So they are brilliant environments for communicating that a brand is for people like you. But in contrast, when it comes to these social signals, paid social ads performed worst of all the channels we looked at, which is quite interesting, considering that I think social ads are a bit of a snake oil when it comes to, or will be on a social media platform, but it doesn't always translate into a sort of a social power or social signaling power. So another channel that appeared to have specific superpowers is working with content creators. So influencers. So respondents felt this channel was second only to TV when it came to communicating that this brand will become well known. But then when asked, would you trust the brand to deliver on its promises, the channel scored weakest of all, which is quite interesting. So I think influencers are often viewed as a cure-all for the decline of TV, helping with everything from raising brand awareness to growing consideration and prompting immediate sales. However, this research would indicate that perhaps influencers are best thought of as like a hype man for your brand, so nudging into the nation's consciousnesses, but without doing all the heavy lifting. Yeah, so the sort of sort of the crux, so the crescendo to this research is that now we have these two case studies. We can look at the mental impact of the media on consumers when layered with the media reach and the media cost to produce sort of a holistic view of the media landscape. So just to explain this chart slightly, best attention is to the right, strongest signal is to the top. The size of the bubble is the potential reach of the media, and then its color is the cost of the media. So a good example would be to look at TV. If you look at YouTube non-skippable ads, before you'd almost say, oh, they're almost as effective as TV, but at a fraction of a price. But when we look at what the channel choice says about the brand's consumer, we can see a world of difference, and you can see TV actually does retain an edge. So, going back to what I said at the start, when quality of media has been measured on things like dwell time, viewability, and attention, these are all sort of reasonably well-developed theories, but I think as marketers we need to be aware of putting them on a pedestal, and actually this sort of more holistic view gives a more robust view of a channel's strengths and, of course, weaknesses. Okay, so in conclusion for my section, before I hand over to Michael, the right channel mix can hugely boost a brand's chances to build perceptions as a financially strong, trustworthy, and as being confident in its high-quality products. And like I said, this is all before even writing a single line of copy. So your choice of media significantly impacts how people perceive a brand. Big stature, public shared consumption media lends your media to much more signaling strength. Signal strength is enduring and unlikely to change over time. So we have now measured this over a 4-year period, and the variance is very low. Some channels are really good at placing your brand in culture. Others are best demonstrating power and confidence. But I'd say a sort of a sensible combination of more than one channel is probably the way to get the best of both worlds. Over to you, Michael.
Cool. Thanks very much, Toby. Having spoken to quite a few clients and people around this research, one of the key questions they continue to pose us is, right, it's great at being able to identify the kind of key trends in media, and how to apply that is then the follow-on question. Because quite often clients or advertisers will be buying an existing mix of media. So they'll need to be able to demonstrate where they currently are now and where they could be. And an example of taking signal strength and a practical application of going through a transition is what I'm going to take you through now. So just to take a little bit of a step back, I think it's really just important to empathize with the marketing or advertising industry, because the media landscape really is complicated. So aspects such as signal strength really just add to like a whole arsenal of different ways to buy and think about media. You've got other areas such as how long the ad needs to be and how it drives effectiveness, or the type of experience the ad drives, through to the different buying models. So being able to take an element such as signal strength and overlay it with all those other criteria, creating a practical application to then demonstrate why, to Toby's point, being on television and demonstrating that signal strength is more important than a non-skip in YouTube. So I'm going to take you through an example of how you can practically go through that exercise yourself to kind of demonstrate the rationale and why it's possible. So just thinking about that question of taking research such as signal strength and making it actionable. So say hypothetically, you've got the option to buy 2 different types of media. So you're potentially buying display and video from Google, and you could be looking to buy a television advert from ITV. And when you look at the CPM, so the cost per thousand for both those different channels and formats, you can see that the obvious answer, if you're looking to drive cost, would be to go into display and video, because it's potentially 10 times more cost effective than ITV. But then when you start to overlay aspects such as signal strength, you can actually see through the data that the display in video is 22% less effective than ITV, for example, which is 33% more effective than average. And through this process, which you can think of it as a waterfall, where you take the CPMs at a top level, and then you start to apply different elements of research, what you're able to do is take an original CPM and then start to adjust it. So this is the key crux of making this research practical, where we're able to use things like an effective CPM. So taking an original number and then through combinations of research, adjusting it to reflect what you're actually buying depending on what you want to buy. So in this case, we've added in signal strength, and you can see that the CPM for display and video has gone from 10 to £12, and ITV's come down by £34. So we're starting to get into a bit of a parity where we're on track to use signal strength to compare a display video buy to an ITV television buy. So really just to unpack that concept of an eCPM a little bit further. So thinking about the cost per thousand, your core CPM, the most common buying model, that is how media is most commonly sold. Whereas an eCPM is effective cost per thousand. It is where you apply your own media planning and buying behaviors or criteria for how you as an advertiser or marketer want to evaluate the media to make it different channels and different formats comparable. So an eCPM allows you to reevaluate the value of media. And based on what we saw before, so the different costs for a display versus ITV, do we really feel these ads with signal strength are comparable? Like, I'm going to say arguably no. So let's look at what else we could factor into that situation. So looking at the core CPMs, so the example of the £10 versus the 100, when you add in a factor of signal strength, like we previously demonstrated how display goes up marginally and ITV comes down quite considerably. When you add in a factor of co-viewing, which Toby was interluding with regards to the research, it enables you to then say, we'll get 20% more value for ITV, therefore we can factor that into the CPM. The viewability, so the likeliness that a person will consume it, all the way through to the likeliness that someone will actually watch a certain percentage of the video. And when you go through that waterfall process of taking all those variables, which we'll say is a hypothetical criteria for an advertiser, when you start to make both the display and video and the ITV much more comparable through the CPM, you can actually see based on that criteria that the ITV buy is actually less than half the cost of what could be considered for the display and video buy, which we think is a nice way to take research such as signal strength and make it applicable in real terms. And when you think about it, the criteria that you use versus another brand versus a colleague will use to evaluate media will really change. And this is just a sample of some of them. So really, it's in the art of the media planning and buying to determine what those are. And hopefully in the next section, we'll try and contextualize that to bring it to life just so you can see more practically. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus in a little bit on attention and viewability to give you some context for how you can apply this yourself through common technologies. So a little bit of theatre or gamification just to add colour to the presentation. So in the next slide, we're going to share a video, and it's going to be a common experience on a news brand. And the task for you is to try and count how many viewable display ads you can see in the video. And just a reminder, the definition of a viewable ad is 50% of the ad in screen for at least 1 second. Okay, so get ready for it. And let's go. Lots of ads present. Oh. Yeah, I can quite see the icon. So hopefully you should have answered as 6. There was actually a few trick ones in there. So the native articles don't necessarily count as display ads, but if you're successful, you would have counted 1 skin, 2 double MPU, 2 MPU, and 1 leaderboard. And I think the key takeaway from that is when you think about the experience that we just showed you through the video and the volume of ads, the level of attention, and the viewability through to other factors such as how congested the experience was, like they are examples of different factors that you as an advertiser or marketer need to think about when comparing the eCPM of a display ad versus television. And the key takeaway from that is, like, at the touch of our fingers, we actually have lots of technologies that allow us to do this right now. So on the left screenshot, you can see an extract from Double Verify that's just surfacing the viewability of ads and the suitability through to the level of kind of brand safety. And then the extract on the right is what a technology such as Lumen would start to reveal, demonstrating where the hotspots on the page are for people actually consuming different areas. And it's the idea that you're able to use this real-time data to feed back into your eCPM in combination with measures and research such as signal strength. So really, just to summarize, like considerations when using signal strength as research or trying to apply it practically using an eCPM, like just think about how an eCPM allows you to evaluate media channels across different formats, potentially where you are as an advertiser versus where you want to be. Everyone as an advertiser wants to go for lots of attention, but attention is a really expensive metric to optimize towards. So you need to think about the kind of compare and contrast of high attention versus low and how they all complement one another. And then really, there is no solid answer. So it's really an iterative process where you need to think about how you're going to experiment, to constantly be driving your eCPM and the use of research such as signal strength forward. So thanks very much for listening to Toby and I. If anyone's got any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
There'll be silence for 15 seconds and then we'll... About 15 seconds.
I think that's 15 seconds.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. If you want to follow up with either Michael or myself, do shoot us an email. And we'll be happy to,
Absolutely.
happy to take any queries. But for now, enjoy the rest of your Thursdays and thanks so much. Okay.
Goodbye.
Cheers.